Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for just really engaging the conversation, and we mean that when we say it. So I hope that you are taking what you learned from this and using it in your life. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, Paul Jobson, who, you wouldn't know it unless you're watching, but you probably can see it on his face. He's getting ready to head down to Guatemala to do some cool stuff with Warrior Way. So, Paul, what's going on with that?
Yeah, man, we are about to hit our trip. It's crazy. It's already here. We kind of woke up the other day and realized we were just a few days away from taking off. We're excited about it. We're taking a group of 32 down to Guatemala. We serve the areas around Antigua, the villages there, and we've created a soccer tournament. A lot of these kids have never even left their villages. We bus them in, we play an all-day tournament, we disciple with them, we mentor them, we celebrate with them the goals and we agonize through the defeats with them, and then we celebrate with a meal afterwards. And just really excited about getting down there and getting back with our second family in Guatemala. So you know what it's like. You travel to Latin America as well, and have just gotten back from a trip. So I know you can relate a bit, but we're excited about it.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's so cool. I'm so excited to hear all that goes on, all the community. I can't wait to hear about the tournament, just seeing the joy on the kids' faces and the families coming together and being able to just start doing life together. Like you said, they might have not only have the kids not gone outside their villages, oftentimes the families haven't either. And so to be able to bring them together, start doing life together, amazing to see what can happen through that, as we've seen in our own soccer communities throughout the U.S. And with that, What better segue? Sometimes you just happen, Paul. Sometimes it just comes.
Phil, you're getting really good at this.
Yeah, really yeah. So today we have with us the CEO of United States Youth Soccer, who is bringing together soccer communities throughout the country. And I know I'm wearing my shirt here. I'm trying to do this well here. Look at that. I got it's from a few years ago. As you can see, it's worn a little bit. I actually, we're recording this on July 5th. And it's the only red, white, and blue shirt I had that I could find. So I wore it yesterday on July 4th as well. So I'm just, I'm wearing it for this interview. I'm just, sometimes I wear shirts 2 days in a row. I'm taking after my 12-year-old, I guess. But that's not what we're talking about today. The shirt is cool. It's from my daughter. Got to play in the national championships back in, I think it was 2015. Amazing experience. I know USYS Soccer is doing some incredible things around the country. We get to talk about that today with Skip Gilbert. And Skip, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just great, Phil, and appreciate you and Paul having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Skip, I've gotten I've had the pleasure of being able to talk with you a little bit, to be able to just share our love for goalkeeping, which, Paul, again, sorry, there's been a couple of these goalkeeping, things where you're kind of the third wheel to the conversation, but that's okay, because we're going to talk about
real,
some of
though.
that today.
I keep it real.
That's true. But, we have so much else, other things that I was so excited to get this conversation on. And we always like to start with our guests, just hearing your story, just hearing how you developed your passion for soccer and leadership, how you ended up with USYS, and just really what you're excited about.
Sure. Well, there's a lot to unpack on that one, but I got my roots in soccer fairly early for someone my age. I started playing back in third, fourth grade, which, way back when most people didn't even know what the sport was. And as a matter of fact, the first time I played was in a game. We went out from school, was thrown out onto a field and said, play. And I had no idea, had never seen soccer before. And suddenly there was a ball at my feet and I thought, what do I do with this? And so, you kind of work your way through it. But over the next couple of years, I drifted into the goal. I decided being a goalkeeper was a lot more my style, my fun, my desire. And I stayed with it right on through my entire career.
And so How did you end up? I mean, I know you didn't have like this, oh, it's the obvious route to be the CEO of USU Soccer, right? There was just kind of a windy road to get there. Can you just kind of take us through that a little bit? And I always love hearing these stories and love sharing with others because, sometimes we think, oh, well, here's the way you do something to get to where you want to go. But sometimes it's just, you're led there through different means. So can you just share that path?
Sure. Well, I went through college thinking that I was going to play in the NASL. That was my goal. That was my dream. That was everything I was looking forward to. Was able to actually achieve that by playing with the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Unfortunately, and I jokingly say my class helped kill the NASL, is that shortly therein the NASL folded. And that was the time between the NASL and when Major League Soccer took off. So I traveled around the country. I played indoor a little bit. I tried what was, I think at one point, the ASL. And at some point it struck me that my parents put way too much money into my education for me to be making $150 a week playing a game I loved. So I moved back to the New York area, got a job in publishing, and really that was the first step in my career, which was all sales. I was sales and marketing for magazines like the Sporting News, Tennis Magazine, Outside Magazine. And from there, I jumped into the property side, working for groups like USA Swimming, USA Triathlon, US Tennis. And it was in different areas. I went from being a chief marketing officer, chief revenue officer, the director of the US Tennis Open. So you get your event background in that side. So when I saw that the CEO of US Youth came available, I actually called Chris and said, why in the world are you leaving such a great role? And he gave me the reasons why. And I said, well, is there someone in line for taking your job? And he goes, well, based on your experiences and everything you do, you should. So I threw my hat in the ring and, knock wood, I was lucky enough to be the last person standing. Took the role January of 2020 and really haven't looked back.
So, I got to say, taking the role January 2020, you got quite the intro. A couple months later, a little thing happened that changed the landscape of everything in the world, including youth soccer. I have a bunch of kids, as people know, who listen to the show, and most of them play youth soccer. And I know it was impacted, massively, right? How was that? Like, what was that? How was that like, welcome to the deep end?
Well, of all the questions that the board asked me during my interviewing process, not one of them was, well, if the world comes to an end, what are you going to do with the sport? And so it was really baptism by fire. But probably the second, third week of February, the NBA was at that point starting to close down. And there was a tournament that was going to be running in Las Vegas that we were a part of. And I received a call from a mom in Hawaii who said, we hear things are happening. We have a team of kids that are about to get on a plane here in Hawaii for Las Vegas. Please, what should we do? And at that point, I made the decision, we got to start shutting it down. I said, get your kids off the plane, stay home. And sure enough, that weekend was when a lot of the sports started to pull back, leading up to the sort of that infamous weekend in March when the whole country really shut down. But, we started to, systemically close everything down as of February. And then, from our perspective, even though the world had come to a stop, being so new in the role, it was a great opportunity to have our organization look in the mirror. What are we doing really well? And I used to preface it, and I still do today. If we were building youth soccer for tomorrow's players today, what would it look like? And if it looks like exactly as it is today, keep going. If we need to make some changes to what we're doing, let's make those amendments. And if we are bringing something new and completely different in, let's prepare for that so that when the green light finally shines and we're able to get back to the game and basically to the life we had always led, we'd be ready to go and we wouldn't kind of miss a beat.
Yeah. Now that's just, and I have to think that your experiences in triathlon, swimming, tennis, like, we talk about not specializing too early in sports playing, right? But I imagine those experiences taught you a lot, and just being able to, I think probably even for the pandemics, I mean, nothing will prepare you fully, but just seeing the different ways different people are leading in different sports probably helped you in a lot of ways, and probably has continued to. Is that an assumption that's correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Being able to lean on what other sports have done, are doing, will do, sort of the philosophy of how sports drive themselves. I mean, I go back to my days at USA Swimming, and it's something that I brought here, which is there's three real components: build the base, promote the sport, achieve sustained competitive success. And so the reality is, if you're not building the base of your player pyramid, that's the root of all evil and the start of all success. And so by doing that, and then for sports like swimming, where you're constantly trying to stay in front of people to say, learn to swim, embrace the sport, become competitive, then you're going to end up being, as they are, the best in the world. And so for the sport of soccer, I don't think we have a growth issue, because just about every kid that's 6 years old is going to kick a soccer ball. Our big issue, and with the Club World Cup coming, the World Cup coming for men, hopefully for women, the Olympics coming, all of these great international competitions coming to our country, the legacy has to be, how do we keep kids playing? That's the real Achilles heel. It's not, can we get them into the sport? It's how do we keep them? Mm-hmm. And that's really been the focus that we've been, really honing in on, for really the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that, Skip, even in the communities that I work in and serve just within our local area here, that we're working on as well. And I know we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper, but before we dive into just more of what you do and how you've gotten to that, I'd love to hear more about you and your why and what makes you tick. What makes you, as the decisions you make as a leader, what are the processes you go through to make those decisions? And what is really what I'm asking is, what is your personal why? What is kind of your life statement that kind of keeps you in the lane that you need to be in to make the decisions you need to be able to sleep at night sometimes, I guess you'd say.
When I'm staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, what's driving it? From my perspective, it's really, and the game has taught me this, soccer, for as elaborate and as beautiful as it is, it's one of the more simple games out there. All you need is a ball. You don't even need shoes. Most people will play with shorts and a shirt on, but even that, it's such a simple game. And that really is how I am kind of embody my life. Keep it simple. There's always a direct path. If you're transparent, if you're honest with yourself and with others, you pretty much know the way you have to go. And if you stay true to that, and you have, and this is where, my background in sales, marketing, event operations, executive management, when you pull it all together, it's like being a goalkeeper on the team. You see the entire world in front of you, and you see how your players have to be positioned to be able to drive the offense, the offensive side of the equation, but then also be prepared for, what's the other team going to do? What are some of those outliers that might, kind of get in the way of things to be able to defend? And so if you do that and you stay true to it, generally speaking, knock wood, success comes.
I like that. I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things, right? And I would think with your breadth of experience across different sports, I'm sure that not only does it help you at times to make decisions, but I'm sure sometimes there's got to be some accumulation of knowledge that can get in the way. Is that the case sometimes, you think, or is it?
Sure. It is. I mean, when I first joined USA Triathlon, I barely knew what it was. I mean, I had to call friends of mine saying, what in God's name is this sport? And tell me about it. And they would say,
why? Why
do they do this? And especially as you go, for the Ironman, you're swimming 2 miles, you're biking 112, and then you run a marathon. And it's like, seriously? But the interesting thing about that is it also shows the beauty of multi-sport play. Most kids grow up, they run, they swim, they ride a bike. And from that standpoint, it's a gentle reminder for me that we can't get into the mindset where the only sport a kid should play is soccer. That comes in time as you age up. But if we think that we're going to take, and we're starting to get there, and actually we really are there, where we start thinking that a 6, 7, 8-year-old has to be on a premier team, getting themselves ready so they can play with Aston Villa by the time they're 18, we've really kind of gone off the rails. And we kind of have to have, as I call it, we see it in business today that everybody's saying there needs to be a correction in, this sector in this industry. And I believe there has to be a correction in youth sports, not just youth soccer, but in youth sports in particular. And so again, keeping it very simple, we have to remember it's a game. We also have to remember that these are kids and they have to grow up to embrace the game so that it lives up to our new vision, which again, we altered once I got here, which is to bring communities together through the power of soccer, making lifelong fans of the game. And if you're 8 years old and you're being driven to be that, player that's going to play in MLS or the Premier League or whatever, when you're 17, 18, 90% of those kids are going to burn out. And if you're no longer a part of the sport, how are you going to be a lifelong fan of the game if you feel disenchanted with the sport, disenfranchised, and simply left out to dry? So we have to make that correction to keep those kids playing.
I love that. And folks, go back, rewind that, listen to it again. It's the CEO of US Youth Soccer telling you not to specialize your kid at 6 years old. It's something we talk about on this show quite a bit and get people's different opinions on it. But I love that. And I love that the goal is to make lifelong fans, right? Not lifelong soccer players necessarily or professionals, but to make lifelong fans of the game. I know that I probably would be playing soccer if my dad wasn't a fan of soccer. He was not a soccer player. He was a fan of soccer. And that led him to say, well, my kids want to play. They need a coach. I'll coach. Now, my life has been directly affected in a great way because of his love for the game. And I think you're right. There's so many kids who are being burned out. Families are being burned out by the game because of some of the things that are going on that we're allowing to happen within our sport. So I love hearing you say that, Skip. Something else to add on that?
It's interesting. Again, going back to the why of why is that so important? And I'll use my experience at tennis. I'm standing at center court at the US Open, my first tournament, and I'm with our chief medical officer. And Andy Roddick, a great American player, top 5 in the world at one point, actually top 10. He never cracked the top 5. He's warming up. And so I looked at Brian and I said, why is it that our women are so great, but our men can't crack the top 5? And he said, you tell me. He goes, look at Andy and you tell me the reason. And I watched Andy, and if you've seen him, overhand, backhand, forehand, world class. And he goes, keep going. What's the reason? And I watched him running around and I said, not a world class athlete. Now granted, Andy's a great athlete and yes, he's world class. But when you compare him within his ecosystem, Novak Djokovic, Andy Murray, Roger Federer, Nadal, Rafael Nadal, all of those guys, they started playing soccer, then they went into track, and then they played tennis. Andy only played tennis from the age of 6. And so he wasn't musculoskeletal wise, he wasn't able to correct and check and go from point A to point B and back in explosive speed. And he just wasn't able to stay at that level. And that's the difference of multi-sport growth and the foundation. And so the reality is, if we really want all of our kids to stay in the sport, we want them to have as broad a view as possible, to take in as many different sports as they can, and then really go with the sport you love. And if we're forcing them to be at 6 years old a soccer player, how many of those kids are really going to want to be soccer players and have it in their heart that that's really where they want to end up? And the U.S. Olympic Committee just said it really well a couple of months ago, where when they talked about how broken youth sport is, they outlined that you need 2 distinct pathways. One for the elite kids, the kids that are going to go and they're going to try to be professional or play for the national team, and again, only a certain subset of that group will make it. But then there has to be a second pathway. And that's for all of the kids that are going to be playing in the bar leagues when they're 40. And that's the pathway that most sports fail to recognize or support. And that's why we lose so many kids, because they don't see the fact that, hey, I could be playing in the same league my dad plays or my mom plays. So I just want to go out and play for fun.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think we, as people, as kids and adults, we get caught up in the Tiger Woods phenomenon, or the players that they've been the specialized player their whole lives, and they've turned out to be the best in the world. But those are the one-offs. There's a book by David Epstein. It's called Range, and it talks a lot about those different things. It's a great book. It talks just about this specifically, about specialization and the folks who have done it and why that's just so ridiculous that they've been able to do it. It's not even worth really going for. But it's an amazing book. I would recommend that to those that are talking about specialization and the pros and cons of it all. But Skip, I love that. I'm sure we'll tap into that a little bit as we go through a little bit more. But through your career, specifically in the game of soccer, were there any defining moments or one specific defining moment that has really kind of pointed you in the direction of leadership that you're in, and maybe some things you've kind of brought with you through your professional career here now?
There's probably, I'm sure there's quite a few. I mean, again, being a goalkeeper, you learn early on that you have to be a leader. I mean, I remember back when I was playing in high school, I'd make a save or I'd come out and take a cross out of the air, and my teammates would say, "Be vocal. You need to tell us what we're doing." I'm sort of an introvert by nature. And so I wasn't very vocal. And again, two of our best players on the team, pulled me aside and said, "You need to find your voice. You need to absolutely tell folks, well, we know you can do it. We know you're going to be there for us, but you need to help us." And once that started kicking in, then you start to see kind of that world in front of you, and it makes your job so much easier. And so from a goalkeeper perspective, there's nothing worse than having to turn around and pull the ball out of the back of the net. But having that vision, having that confidence, really helps set the stage that you're going to have a lot of success. But no matter how good you are, there's always going to be a ball coming at the back of the net. There hasn't been a team that has gone an entire season and shut out every opponent that they've come across. Or every practice, you keep the stakes clean. So from that standpoint, from early on, that no matter what you do, at some point you're going to let one go in, and you can't hang your head. You can't blame somebody else. You need to step up and you look at it and go, okay, what do I do? What should I have done? And you move forward from that. And that kind of, to me, I've never been a goalkeeper that would stand and yell at my teammates, even if a guy completely dropped the ball on something and, it ultimately ended up in the back of the net. Well, that happens. We all make mistakes, but you can't belittle the kid right there, because he knows what happened, and you just got to say, all right, let's do it the next time. And that's the same in business. Growing up and kind of getting my teeth, in a corporate environment and for-profit companies in the 80s, we've all had bosses that would just rip your head off. And 9 times out of 10, you walk out of there not thinking, oh boy, I'm going to go out and do it, much better. It takes a hit to your confidence, and you kind of figure out other ways to be able to get there. So again, the sport itself has certainly taught me a lot about, both personal and professional, just how to act.
Yeah, and that touches on really, I mean, obviously the goalkeeping stuff. I mean, you talked about a couple of the things there, just as far as lessons that, I think when your teammates came and said, hey, you need to be more vocal. How many goalkeepers have I trained that's the hardest thing for them, is to be vocal. They can get down the technique, they can get down the footwork, they can get down the ball skills, they can get down all that stuff. But being vocal, they're just like, but I'm reserved. I'm like, well, then figure out how to be vocal, because if you're not going to be a complete goalkeeper. And I think with that comes life lessons, understanding. But you've touched on a couple of the life lessons, some of the business lessons that you've learned being a goalkeeper. Are there any others that you have that you want to share? I know, we could probably talk about this for a whole lot longer than we have time for today, but what are a couple of those other things that you've learned from playing, specifically from playing the position of goalkeeper, that we can talk about a little bit deeper into some of the things you've just mentioned as well, but what are a few of those things?
Again, I think, at least from my perspective, that emotional roller coaster that so many people ride. And I found playing that you can't celebrate off the charts and you can't get angry off the charts, that you really have to keep that emotions in check. And I've learned that, and as I've gone through my business career, to try to be as even keeled as possible. And I'll hear it from people that will say, wow, that just happened. How in the world did you not lose, you lose your mind and just completely lose it? And it's like, well, because if you do that, you take your eye off the ball, and if you get so rattled by something that happens on the field, chances are something's going to fall through the crack. And as a goalkeeper, if that happens, you're picking it up behind you, in the back of the net. And so to keep that emotions in check, no matter whether it's great or it's not, it just helps solidify everything. And I think it also helps those around you have the confidence that you've got things under control, that you're, and they know that, especially those that you work with or that work for you, they realize that, at the end of the day, you don't have to win every single time. There's always going to be a goal scored. And therefore that gives them the confidence to perhaps push a little bit further, to look a little bit deeper into an issue, and how do we potentially work things so, here at US Youth, that we keep more kids in the game. We develop not better referees, but more referees that can be better at de-escalating in today's world some of the emotions that they're hearing out on the sidelines. So when you put that together, I think that's probably one of the big focal points that I've had to deal with.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always talked about as a keeper is similar, and I think it jumps off of what you've been talking about the last couple answers, but just the idea of a goalkeeper needing to be stable. When I'm coaching the keepers, it's, hey, stay positive, because you're setting the tone from the back. And also, I think the idea of, as you talked about, the ball will go in the back of the net. How many times have you heard a parent say, or a kid say, I don't want to play keeper, or I don't want my kid to play keeper because, there's so much pressure and everything's riding on them. And I go, there's 11 people on the team. It has to go through 11 players to get to the keeper, or 10 players to get to the keeper. And, everything happens as a team. And I think as a goalkeeper, the lesson, I think, is stronger. At least for me, I recognize that teamwork concept so much, being a keeper and being able to see the whole field. As I've said to them, you're the only player that sees the whole field the whole game, unless somebody gets behind you with that. Okay, you can always talk about that. But most of the time, you're the only player. So you should be leading. But also, you can see, and hopefully you can be able to help your teammates be better. You can be, as my high school teammates would say to me, Phil, when you're not playing keeper, there were a few games where I played only a half or didn't play for whatever reason. They said, we feel like part of our brain is gone because you are helping us to see behind us. You're helping us to know the whole field. And I think that goes into leadership, because as I've been leading organizations, how can I help all of my people be better? How can I help them see things they don't see? How can I help them understand things they may not be able to see the full picture because their back's to it, or because they aren't able to look to the side because they're, so whatever the case may be. And so that's something that I know that I've seen as far as being a keeper as well. And I think you just set the tone. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I when you look at parents that say, oh my gosh, why would we want our kid to be a keeper? And the reality is, at least from my perspective, and I played many years, I never came off with an injury. I never, I was able to maneuver through the box and put my body in positions that probably should never really do. And again, if you have the confidence to dive at someone's feet or come be able to take a ball out of the air, and you're going to be hit by 2 or 3 people at the exact same time, that's part of the challenge, and that's part of the beauty of that position. And again, I think if I have discussions with parents and they're saying, well, should I let my son or daughter be a goalkeeper? It's like that you just addressed it in the wrong way. It shouldn't be your decision where your kid plays. Your kid needs to understand all 11 positions on the field and let them decide where to play. Because if you say to someone who just naturally wants to be a goalkeeper that you're going to play and be forward, chances are they're going to be one of those kids who are going to leave the game because they're just not going to be completely fulfilled with what they're getting out of the sport. And so from that perspective, the parent needs to put their own idiosyncrasies, their fears, their anxieties. They need to kind of just bite their lip and actually ask their kids, what do you like about, being up front, being in midfield, being a defender? What do you like about being in goal? And realistically, in the way I transitioned it, I started as a forward. And the way I transitioned it was before practice, I would just jump in goal just for the fun of it because I thought it was great. And so I knew I wasn't going to be our goalkeeper because our goalkeeper, I was short at whenever I was 5th grade and our goalkeeper was pretty tall. And so, but the coaches saw that I loved it so much and I'd be diving all over the place and making saves that in one game, I think it was my 5th grade year, a ball went over our keeper's head and he just watched it. And suddenly the coach went, Skip, you're in. And I went in, never looked back.
Yeah. I'd like to do a study on how many keepers used to be forwards and particularly strikers. I know that was my story as well. Mine was a little different. I had asthma, so I struggled with running as a kid. I still struggle with running as an adult, even though I outgrew asthma. So I don't know if it was the asthma or just me, but then I became keeper and just loved it. And to your point, but what would you say too? I think it's not just parents, it's also coaches. I've heard coaches say, I need them in the field. Even though the kid's like, I want to play keeper. No, we need our best athletes in the field. And we just, keeper, I just look at them and go, if you talk to the best managers in the world, they're starting with a keeper and a center back. Like, if you don't have those positions, you're going to be hurting. You're going to give up soft goals and other things are going to be going on. But what would you say to those coaches who are saying those type things?
I'd say, are you on the field to play to win, or are you on the field to develop the best players? Because if you're on the field to develop players and, again, make fans for life, you have to take into the equation of where you're positioning players where they feel the most comfortable. And if a kid truly, even though they may be the best athlete, out there, if the kid truly wants to play in goal, chances are they're going to bring more to that position and to the team than they would if you put them up, and again, at some point, sure, they might be faster, they might have a harder shot, but at some point you're going to start taking on competition. They're going to kind of take that kid out of the game. And the kid ultimately is going to start to take themselves out of the game because they're not playing the position that they truly feel that they should be in. And sure, there's a difference if, you put them at forward or midfield or defender, and sometimes you shift those things around. But a goalkeeper is truly a unique skill set because, again, it wears a different jersey. It's a different mentality. It's a different equation to be able to get the best out of a player from that field.
Yeah, and the last thing I just want to talk to you about this, and I'm sure some of this stuff will come up in the other answers too, just as far as the goalkeeping stuff, since you're a keeper. But I always say to any keeper, to play keeper, you got to have a little bit of crazy in you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you have to have and I'll go back. I went to a prep school in New Jersey, and my, we'd get report cards, and we even get a report card from coaches. And my sophomore year, I went home for Thanksgiving, and my parents pulled me into the dining room, and they were looking at something from Lawrenceville. And I thought, oh, this probably isn't going to end well for me if it's classroom based. And they said, we need to read you this from your report card, and I thought, what's it going to be? And it turns out it was from our JV coach. And he said, great things about my goalkeeper, but he said he has absolutely no regard for his own personal safety. And I thought, there we go. I'm not looking back. That was a support that, and Fred Gerstel, who wrote it, probably didn't realize that just turned the green light on for me to say, I am not stopping.
That's
and
right.
so from that standpoint, you can't be thinking about, if you get hit or knocked and, this hurts. I mean, it's always going to hurt. You dive 10,000 times, you're just going to feel it at some time. But for the true goalkeepers, and I guess I'm one of them, no pain, no gain really actually means something. Because, and again, I didn't go out to hurt people. I went out because I love the goal, I love the game, and I put myself in positions to get the ball. And again, going back to one other story, I went to the All-Star game in New England. I played up at the University of Vermont, and I got into my dorm room before, as we were all coming together, and my roommate looked at me and he goes, you knocked me out for the season. And I thought, and he went to the University of Massachusetts, and we went up for a ball and we collided, and I fell on him and I broke 3 of his ribs. And he said, and I thought, do I need to sleep with my eyes open tonight? And he goes, no, it's a great play. You made a great play. It just happened. And I hold no ill will. It was, it is what it is. But again, those are the things that all goalkeepers have to go through.
Yep.
Love that. I think your report card pretty much sums it up. That statement pretty much sums it up.
Yep.
What most coaches are looking for in their goal, maybe all their field players, but they're obviously their goalkeeper. So I love that. And that transitions well into the next question I want to ask you, Skip. You've been in the game a long time, and but through your playing career, who was one of your best coaches, and what made them stand out? Like, why would you identify them as your best coach? Because we have a lot of coaches that listen to this podcast and are all, as coaches, we're always formulating who we are and how we can be better. Who are some of the most impactful coaches in your playing career, and what are some things you've held on from lessons maybe they taught you over the years?
Sure. Well, two come to mind. One is George Seymour, coach from New Jersey. He was coach of Mercer County Select. He's the one that kind of put me on that track to get through ODP, and with the select team, we only played against the NASL B teams and adult European teams that came into the tri-state area, and occasionally some tournaments and state cups. But he was one of those coaches that really didn't say much. He sat, and again, back when I was playing, the coach mentality was always directing from the sideline and constantly chattering to your players. He just sat on the bench, and occasionally he might say 1 or 2 things. And and to this day, of all the games I played for him, I only once remember him saying anything that wasn't positive. And I came off the field. It was a 0-0 draw. And as I sat down into the bench, he kind of looked at me and he goes, "What game are you watching?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "I'm watching your distribution, and you're clearly not watching the same game." And, that was a knock on, just where was I actually distributing the ball when I had it? And, and again, it was a mid-game check that, usually he'll say some things afterwards, or he'll incorporate your weaknesses into the training sessions so that you don't really understand that this was a perceived weakness. You're just going through a training, and subconsciously you're getting better at this, that, or the other, but that's his way of improving the player. And he did that with all of our players, and so many of them from that group went on to play in the NASL. I mean, he was just phenomenal. And then the other one would be Nick Zlatar. This Nick Zlatar. He was one of the national team coaches, and he coached our Eastern Regional team in what used to be the national sports festivals. And again, just, his knowledge of the game, his knowledge of positioning, his knowledge of supporting players was just phenomenal, that you felt, you weren't just playing for yourself, but you were playing for him and his vision of what we should do. And again, those two really helped kind of set the stage for me.
Yeah, I always love hearing those, just the coaches and why coaches have had impact. As a coach, I know, Paul has coached and still is coaching his kids in different ways. But just to hear, it's not one thing that makes a coach great, right? There are so many different things that coaches bring to the table, which is great because we're wired differently. So if everyone had to do the same thing, then only a certain person could be a coach. But the different coaches, as you learn, the keys are to connect with the kids and connect with the adults, whoever you're coaching, and how can you make them the best they can be. And if you're seeking to do that, it will shine through. And love hearing that, and I heard that in that response. All right, so as the CEO of US Youth Soccer, and you've also had other positions that we've talked about in these different sports, but the reality is youth sports has changed a lot since we were all kids. I think we're all a little different ages, but for the most part, we can agree on the fact that it has changed. Youth sports in general, and youth soccer is no different. But there's some good and there's some bad that comes with change, right? Almost all the time. So what are some of the things that you really like about the current state of soccer in the United States, youth soccer in particular, but also as it goes up to the professional ranks? And, what are some of the things you might want to change? And, you might have some ability to do that in your position.
Sure. I mean, from the I guess the good side, is there are teams, clubs, leagues for everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't really matter your skill level. There's a pathway for you. And so from that standpoint, it gets everybody involved in the game, and it at least puts choices out there to which direction that they want to go. For kids that just want to play to be social, you can certainly do that to a point. But for the kids that want to play, there's a lot of different options, and it's sort of the benefit and the curse. I think it's a good point in the fact that the sport has become so popular that you can see sort of the end game. College soccer is so much better than it was years ago. That it's a true draw. They're also getting a lot more club soccer, so that even if you don't want to spend the time and you really don't want to be a D1 player, but you're going to a D1 school, you can be a club soccer player and have a great experience. And then given what's going on around the world, and certainly with MLS, USL, and WSL at the professional level, it gives kids that aspirational moment that if they dream that they want to be a professional soccer player, they can see it up close and personal all around the country, and with technology around the world, to envision what their life might be like if they're able to get to that level. So I think from that standpoint, there's a lot of good.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about earlier was, one of the kind of negative sides is kids are either specializing what I believe is too early, and you seem to agree with that. But also, people are burning out, and it might be related, it might not, it might be in other things, but they're burning out and they stop playing. That's the big tragedy to me. I know, is because I've loved this game, and I stopped playing in college, but I still love the game. I didn't stop playing because I hated the game. I stopped playing for other reasons. But I think a lot of people are burning out I'm seeing it 15, 16. Sometimes 14, because they're playing in these different, I'm not going to name the letters of the different things that are going on, but we all know what they are, and they're basically acting as college kids already at 12, 13, 14, the travel, the nationwide everything all the time, but also just the intensity is at levels that, are more than they used to be. So what are your thoughts on all that, and how can we, what can we do to keep kids enjoy? I mean, we can't make people do anything, but what are some of the things we can do to the landscape to make it so that, and from your opinion and from your position as you see all the different places around the country, to keep them in the game and to keep them so that they can be fans of the game?
Sure. And I have two responses on that. The first is we're the only team sport that doesn't have what I term alternative programming. And by that, if you look at some of the other major team sports in this country, look at football. The concussions came through and parents started to pull their kids out of football because of the potential danger. And so USA Football and the NFL came out with flag football. And flag football is pulling kids in droves. And especially on the girls' side, girls are flocking to it. And I know the folks at the NFL and USA Football are trying to position flag football to become an Olympic sport, which again will just explode the popularity of that discipline. Basketball, same thing. They were losing kids. They couldn't keep them involved. So they started 3v3. It's now an Olympic sport. Hockey, same thing. They've created street hockey, 3v3, and it's moving in the right direction. Lacrosse, as young as it is, sort of in that main thoroughfare of youth sports in this country, they've already jumped out in front of it, and they're starting to bring in a smaller lacrosse sixes, a smaller game. So we have it at the very local level, but there's nothing like soccer fives or soccer four, or soccer threes, where you could create alternative programming to just keep kids involved. And I've spent a lot of time talking to our friends over in England with the FA. They've gone through this exact same thing. They're probably a couple of years ahead of us, but they've said they've come out with 3v3 and 5v5, and they're seeing that more kids are staying involved in the game because you can play co-ed, you can play different years, you can play when you want it, how you want it, where you want it, kind of like what cellular technology is giving us. But they're also seeing a huge influx in adult play coming back to the game. Because again, instead of going out and saying, all right, I'm going to play 11v11 every weekend, and I'm going to have to go to 2 or 3 practices a week, and I'm 15, and I just don't really want that time commitment. Well, if I can run down to the schoolyard, play a quick 3v3, that might work. And so if we're able to somehow, and we're talking to technology companies about how can we create that solution in a box. So, the folks at NFHS, the National Federation for High Schools, they've even said if we can help create that, schools would be a great environment, because you don't need adults, you don't need coaches, you don't need referees. You're just giving the kids a canvas to be able to go out and have some fun. It's almost like street soccer, but now let's bring it into that organizational umbrella. And it's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different paradigm than what 11v11 will give us. And so if we can bring that into the fold, that's going to have a huge change on keeping kids involved in the sport. Part 2 of the equation is, as you alluded to, we're burning kids out earlier and earlier. The dynamic is that soccer is getting, and I heard some parents at our regional championships a couple of weeks ago saying that, a friend of theirs has a 12 and a 13-year-old, and they're spending 10 grand a year on each kid to be able to play soccer. And I stopped dead in my tracks, and I was like, how is that even possible? And so unfortunately, because soccer is so fractionalized in this country, U.S. Soccer years ago said, we'll have a bunch of different lanes and everybody can register players. What that created was a paradigm where you're not really focused on player development. You're focused on player cannibalization, so that the team here wants to take from the team there because they're in a completely different league than this team over here. And so what you're seeing is that you have, I'll say Atlanta. You've got teams going, 4 or 5 hour drives to be able to stay in their lanes, when you could have 10 teams within a half hour of each other playing each other. And so the money aspect of it, and as I call it, the adult personal agenda and financial agenda, is clouding the issue. And it's not just a soccer issue. This is a youth sport problem that we almost have forgotten why we're doing this. It's not about our profit and loss statement. It's not about, how can we make money, which unfortunately we're seeing more and more, of these financial firms and these venture capital firms coming in, and they're buying up everything on the planet so they can get a great return on investment. Kids can't be an equation of a return on investment. Kids have to be able to be kids. And if we're going to go down that path, well, the end result is what we're going to see. More and more kids are going to leave the sport or go to other sports or just leave sport entirely. And I think that's unfortunate, not just for sport itself, but for society, because we all know that if you're active and you have an active lifestyle through your teenage years, you're more likely to be active as an adult. And if you're more likely to be active as an adult, your insurance costs will be lower. Your medical bills will be lower. Your cognitive skills will be enhanced and increased. So, there's so many benefits to sport. We're losing sight of that. And that's why I always say we need to have a correction. But unfortunately, that correction will not be comfortable for some people because it may lose some of their revenue.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's there's so much there. Obviously, we can unpack for so long, but I think we've talked with so many people about these issues, and I can't recall a time we've talked to someone who's really sitting in a position to say, we can try out some things that can help, right? And I'm sitting here in Sacramento, and this weekend is the Homeless World Cup, right? Street soccer USA is a part of that, and to see just watching the documentary on the Homeless World Cup and seeing how people are literally coming from around the world playing 7v7, and yet we don't really see it on a larger scale. Here in the U.S., even though people don't even know what's going on. And I know that our street soccer league's going on, but you don't hear about them. You don't, it's not even a thought for kids and parents. And so what are some of those things that, in your mind, or things that you're actually piloting or trying that might be able to put a dent into some of this stuff? And I know it's baby steps, and I know it's not something we're going to turn the ship around tomorrow. But, you got to do it, as we say. I just got back from Honduras. We say poco a poco, right? Like, little by little. How can what are some of those things we can do little by little?
And that's the underscore is little by little, because unfortunately, and this is the world we live in, there's a new acronym league that comes together every year, every season. Someone's going to come out and say, we're aligned with MLS or NWN, and we've got the pathway for you, and we can get your kids further than anybody else. And, the downside to that is parents believe that, and they just go over and they move along. And so if we come out and say we want to make a correction and we want to try to remove some of the travel or some of the costs, those clubs and those leagues that might get hit, and we get threatened all the time. If you don't do exactly what we say, we're going to go to, US Club, or we're going to go to AYSO or SAY or USSSA, whoever the other lanes are, we're going to go over there because they'll let us do what we want. And so we have to be able to navigate it where we have to make sure that every step along the way is driving relevancy for the clubs and, more importantly, for the families. Because if the families don't understand the relevancy of what you're doing, the clubs are just going to go where they can make the most money. And if we put a barrier up there, ultimately we're going to lose all those players, in which case, then we're, trying to make productive change for a decreasing inventory. And so it makes it, we have to kind of do it. We have to be very focused in how we make those changes so that we don't alienate those that'll just run somewhere else.
Yeah, I think it's a whole nother topic for probably an entire show. And I'd love to maybe we do that one day. Because I think my question was along the same lines of Phil's, and it wasn't directed at you necessarily, but we have had these conversations a lot. I think the question comes down to, who leads the charge, who leads the change, and I think we have to do it collectively. And you named 6 different organizations who probably have similar missions within youth soccer in the United States, and are all there for probably, different reasons. And the same idea with the different, I live in a very small town, and there's not enough space for the 2 club teams that are here, but there's 2, and it's detrimental to the growth of the sport in our little town. And so, that question of who leads the charge, who leads the change, I think we have to all do it together. I think that's, those are maybe some of the little baby steps we got to come into as well, and figure out how do we get our heads around that. So I love that you're thinking through those processes as well.
And to that point also, I mean, again, and we have discussions with those other organizations, to say how can we work together? We all have end games in mind. We all want to do things certain ways, but there's got to be a point where we can do things for the ultimate good of the player. And I have this discussion even with US Soccer, who, as the national federation in this country, they also need to look at the youth space and say, and they could say, well, realistically, all kids under the age of 13 should be categorized as players. I mean, if I had my druthers, that's the way it would be. You can't under 13. If you're under 13, you can't be on an elite team, a travel team, a competitive team, a select team. You're on a team, because at that point, you're still growing. You're still mentally, physically, physiologically, psychologically developing. And for an 8-year-old to be put on an elite team, by the time they're 15, they could be so far behind in player development that, the parents can be sitting there going, we've been spending thousands of dollars a year, and our kid's now the slowest, has, all of a sudden going in a different direction. What was the point? Where, again, if you go back and a lot of countries around the world will do this, you want the kids to develop on their own rate, multi-sport play, yes. But eventually, by the time they get to 12, 13, 14, soccer is going to be, they're going to be good. They're going to be passionate about it, and then they're going to take off. And we want that continuum to exist. But we're clouding the issue by bringing in all of these acronyms for the level of play for single-digit age kids when they should be able to learn at their own rate.
Skip, it would be safe to say that there's so much focus on finding, America's Messi, that we're starting entirely too early and not realizing how guys like Messi actually develop. It's a lot of it is that, hey, my kids are decent soccer players because we just play soccer in our house. We play in the yard. My 14-year-old might be on his first select team this year. No one else plays select soccer, from a soccer family. We don't push it. But are we too focused on trying so hard to develop that elite player that we're not really focusing on the way that it actually should happen, which is kind of what you're saying is, hey, allow these kids to develop on their own, have fun with the game, whatever game it is. The ones who fall into the soccer lane because they develop in the right way, mentally and physically and emotionally, to be able to be successful, if that's the route that they're going to go, however they want to define success. Do you think we're missing the boat because we're focusing on the wrong thing at the wrong time?
To a degree, yes. But again, if you think about it from a society standpoint, I mean, I got a letter in the mail yesterday from a group that says that they can help my kids, even though my kids two are out of college, one is still in college. And it said, we can get your kid into Stanford or an Ivy League institution, and you do it our way. I mean, that's sort of the, capitalism at its finest, that, how do you help parents get their kids where they want to be? With sport, that danger, is certainly apparent, that there are a lot of clubs out there that are going to say, if you sign with our club, you have 2 clubs in your town. One club very well may say, we can get a D1 scholarship for your kid if they come and sign with us. The reality is we have 2.5 million kids playing under US youth. All of the other sanctioning bodies have hundreds of thousands. So collectively, there's, just over 3 million registered through US Soccer, and then a couple of other millions of kids that are playing unregistered. There's only so many scholarships available at the NCAA level. And so the reality is, if we think that there's 2 million elite kids, what we've done is taken the typical player development pipeline, which is a pyramid, and we've taken it and we've inverted it. So it's now you've taken the base of the pyramid and you've artificially inflated it to the top of the pyramid as your elite. And when you turn the pyramid upside down, eventually it's going to crumble. And that's the danger of youth sports right now, not just in soccer, but we have too many kids that really aren't elite, but are being designated as elite. And they're again, artificially inflating all of the parents' designs and hopes and dreams for their kids. And at some point it's it's just going to fall apart. And so realistically, it's not something that USYS can do. It's something that the ecosystem has to start to say, enough's enough, and let's start to check what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I like that. I saw that a lot, Skip, coaching at the collegiate level for so many years, just with all the different leagues that were cropping up, and all of a sudden it was diluted. After at one point, you're like, man, what are all these leagues, and why are these teams in this league if these are the elite players? Because they were being sold what you just said. Go through our pathway, you'll be a Division I player. And I mean, as a Division I soccer coach, it was almost harder to select players at that point, because you kind of have that sympathy feeling of, man, these parents have paid, in excess of 10 grand a year. And I'm, if I'm asked on a panel, I tell parents, hey, save your money, invest it, and then you can pay for college. Don't use your kid's soccer career as an investment mode to pay for college. I think you're going down the wrong path. But anyway, I could go on for a long time about these things, but I agree with what you're saying, Skip. It's a bit inverted there, and they're being sold a bill of goods in some ways.
Yeah, and also on that note, Paul, you notice we've done now enough of these episodes that you see common themes crop up amongst the different people we talk with. And I remember, the one that I remember saying it last was Jay DeMerit, where he said, we're now catering, we're basically putting it all in, and we're coaching to the 1%, right? And we're creating these leagues for the 1%. And that is something that, we're completely losing the 99%, and that will have a massive impact as far as you're talking about, like fans of the game and kids who are, because if you're not in that 1%, then it won't be fun. It won't be something you're ready for. It won't be something that you're going to be able to keep up with. And that just is. It just is the reality of it all. And quite frankly, most of the kids aren't going to want to do that. It's just not. It's not something that they're made for. Wired, all the other things, right? So, yeah, I think that's something that I've heard multiple times. And you said it a different way, but it's really that same idea, right? We're inverting the pyramid. We're coaching to the 1%. So,
yeah, I agree with that for sure. And we've been going for a while here, Skip. We want to be. We value your time, so we appreciate you being on with us today. And we've always got a couple questions we kind of wrap things up with as we transition to the end here. And again, just appreciate you so much and what you're doing for the game and for the kids in our communities. But before we end here, a couple quick questions from us. First question, how have you used the lessons you've learned directly from the game of soccer in your relationships, whether it's marriage, parenting, any of those relationships, directly from soccer into those relationships?
That's a good, I go back to the very start. Keep it simple. I'm not, I'm not a man of many words. I'm probably the introvert in the room. And so whether it's with the kids, my wife, my family, friends, my colleagues, the folks that I work with or around the ecosystem, you don't have to say a lot. You just need to kind of be true to your mission. And from my perspective, and yes, I changed the vision was to make fans for life. For me, that's all it is. If I do my job well, then when kids are my age, they're still, proud to be associated with the sport. I could care less how many of the kids are national champions or come out through ODP or play college or, whatever it is. I want those kids just to be fans. And if we do that and you keep it simple, you keep it direct, and you're just honest with everybody, hopefully you'll have more successes than failures. And like a goalkeeper, I'll make a lot more saves than picking the ball out of the back of the net.
Yeah, it's so funny to me to just see like just my kids, right? Because 4 of my 5 kids play soccer, and the 5th played as a freshman in high school and enjoyed her time. But to watch my oldest play, she's the one who played the national championship. She was on a team that was incredible, sent several players, it was the anomaly, several players D1. A couple are probably going to be going on playing pro from that team. It's just crazy odds that were not the norm, right? But she ended up stopping playing in college, and she just never really loved it at that level. She said, I never really loved the game. And yet I watch her play just for fun with other people, and she absolutely loves it. Just see joy. And I remember, I basically now at 21, I watch her play the game with the joy that she had at the age of 5, 6, 7, before she played at the quote unquote elite level at 8 years old, right? And that was a whole different story. But to watch that, then she ended up going to Nepal to do some ministry and to be able to play there, and the connections it can make. And so if she hated the game, she wouldn't even want to play it, right? But because it never killed that joy, and that was something that I've been trying to work into them since they're little. Like, hey, this is a game. At the end of the day, this is a game. It's fun. It's just a place you can have joy, hopefully have joy. And if you're not, then don't be playing like that. Don't ruin it. But that's been something that I've seen firsthand, which has been really cool.
And that comes down to the basic core, which is relevancy. The sport, how sport aligns with an individual is all about how relevant it is to their entire composition, as a human being, as a person, what they want to get out of life. And, my 3 kids all played soccer, but at some point they walked away from it. And as hard as it was for me, when they made that decision, and as hard as I think it was for my kids to come to me and say, I don't think I'm going to play anymore. I had always said, what you want to do is what matters. Soccer means something to me, and it's part of my DNA. If it's not part of your DNA, do what is, because that's what's ultimately going to make you happy. And they still will watch the games with me. They'll go around, and if they go and kick, they thoroughly enjoy it. But at that point in time, it wasn't for them. And I think that discussion with so many parents is what's missing, is that you can have the fastest, the biggest, the most skilled, the most technical, the tech set, from a technical standpoint. But if they don't have it in their heart, they're not going to end up playing in the MLS. Yeah. And sometimes we forget to communicate that to parents so that they're supportive of their kids to walk away and maybe play less than more.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Skip. As Paul said, we and I've said this in a lot of the episodes, all good things must come to an end, and this is our last question. So what have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership?
I got a call a couple of weeks ago from Tom Mulroy. And Tom, they call him Soccer Tom, and he goes around the country and he does, I think he's got the Guinness World Book of Records for juggling or something. But he played in the NASL even before I did, back in the mid 70s, I think. And he just wrote a book, and he asked me to read it. And it was called 90 Minutes with the King. And it's going to be coming out later this summer. And he was a kid that school didn't necessarily agree with. He wasn't one that really applied himself academically. But oh my gosh, did he love the game of soccer and the challenges that he personally took to be able to get where he was and where he wanted to be. And the book is titled because when he played with the Miami Toros, he played the New York Cosmos the year Pele played with him, and he marked Pele. And the part that just stood out to me was at the end of each game in the NASL, Pele had an agreement with the referees. 10 seconds before whistle, they'd point to Pele and he'd run off the field so he wouldn't get mobbed by the crowd. And with that, the game that Tom marked him, Pele went up to him, patted him, and said, "You played a great game," and gave him his jersey. And Tommy just thought, "Holy Christmas, I'm going to get killed." He put it under his shirt, and as soon as the whistle, he ran into his locker. But I think that from what soccer can do to change someone's life, the steps that you have to take and the focus that you have to take to be able to get there says a lot about what the game can do for people, but what life can mean for people. And it just really resonated with me. So that would be one on my list. And it's coming out this summer, and I believe the title will be 90 Minutes with the King.
Well, I think we've had a couple firsts in the last few episodes, and this is the first time I think we've had a book that hasn't even been released yet being recommended, and I'm very much looking forward to grabbing that. That sounds fantastic. And so we had early on in the show, we had Clyde Best, who played against Pele as well, and he didn't mark him. Obviously, they were both attacking players, but to be able to hear these stories of especially now that Pele has passed on, to be able to hear and to keep it going, because what a great man and what a great ambassador for the sport. So I look forward to checking that out when it comes out, and we'll have the links to everything. Hopefully you can pre-order it at this point or be able to get information. We'll just at least have the name of the book, that the current title at least, and be able to check that out, as well as the one that Paul mentioned earlier. We'll have links to US Youth Soccer if you're not familiar with that. But Thanks, Skip. Just appreciate all you're doing. Appreciate all the thinking that is going into this, and that you're really putting heart and soul into making soccer better for everyone, and for not just a select elite few that oftentimes it seems like is getting the focus. So thank you so much, Skip, for fighting for that, and appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Phil, Paul. Appreciate it. Fun conversation. Always enjoy things like that. But again, thank you for all that you guys are doing to support the game.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, folks. Thanks again for being a part of this. And thank you for just really thinking about how you can make the game better as well. And so hopefully some of the things you learned today will help you to do that. As always, you can learn more about Warrior Way Soccer, what Paul and Marcy are doing down there in Waco and Guatemala and other places, warriorwaysoccer.com. You can find out about Coaching the Bigger Game and the work that I'm doing with that at coachingthebiggergame.com. And anything else you have questions about, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me, Phil, at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. And love to hear your feedback. Love to hear any questions you have for me, for our guest, for anybody else, and just how we can make the show better. Any guests you think that would be good to have on the show, please share those with us. And as always, hope you're taking what you're learning from this show, and you are using it in your life to be a better leader, a better parent, better spouse, a better friend, better coach, better in all that you do, and continually reminding yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.